What I don't know. Do you want to finish the last portion of the conversation, or can I take us to a slightly more serious direction?
Spin the block for us, player. What you got?
Um, what I spoke to a friend of mine who's in Nigeria, a Nigerian friend, a mutual Nigerian friend of ours, and there's a very interesting there's a very interesting social situation in Nigeria right now. Are you familiar with what's happening right there?
Lighten us.
So essentially, SARS, and I'm sure people have seen the hashtag SARS stands for the Strategic Anti-Robbery, or is it anti-robbery squad? Could be strategic or state anti-robbery squad, but essentially it is the localized police in Nigeria, local national police in Nigeria. They have a significant amount of not only influence within the area, but also a long history of just police brutality, violence, and just oppressive tactics on Nigeria, right? So much so that the system has become that particular system has become renowned with police brutality, and the whole concept of the likelihood of you getting harmed by police on your way back home is a very real one for many Nigerians. I spoke to one of our mutual friends, and they were saying that in Nigeria they've never been held hot, they've never seen been held hostage or been robbed at gunpoint or anything of that sort, but many of their friends have stories on how they have been beaten and abused by the police, right? So the reality for police brutality there is significantly higher, and the fact that it's happening on a black on black thing kind of pushes us to the conversation of policing and what that means in communities. How does it work, how does it not work, when is it relevant, when is it not relevant? But I think it's just responsible for us on this podcast to highlight that, because that's a very real situation, and that's something that is very relevant in our time, in the sense that it is young black people who are pushing for social change in ways that are more unprecedented in our generation or in recent generations, especially in that portion of the world. So for my Nigerian brothers and sisters, I salute you, I stand with you, I support you. The fight is complicated, but you have supporters in us here at the All the Way Live podcast.
Yeah. So in support, what are you in support of, right? In terms of how do we begin to approach to fix this problem, right? You spoke to policing, right? And so like what works in terms of policing for you? We'll start there. What does policing do well in your experience?
And let me first lead with the fact that I don't have the answers, right? And that situation is also one that's very complex. It touches on the systemic corruption that is very real in Nigeria, that is almost at the core of not only its economy but politics, and that is something that I could not ever say that I can speak on as an authority for that particular situation. In terms of policing, especially in Africa and African American um, communities, I just think, bro, it's very difficult to say, because the situation in Nigeria is very different than your regular situation. It's very, very difficult. You have, from my understanding, politicians that are endorsing the rampant vandalism and destruction that is happening within the streets, almost kind of very similar to what's happening in the US, but I think on a more blatant level. So the situation is different in that regard. So it's hard to say what is the solution. I asked our friend the same question, and they also were at a loss for words in terms of what the solution would exactly what the solution is.
Yeah.
Mm.
So even like regardless of, I mean, not regardless of a solution, but just in terms of like in whatever space, what have you seen? What have the police done well, right? Like, so what if we're gonna have a conversation about policing? We need police, right?
Mm.
So what do they do well?
I think it's always about maintenance of law and order, right? Law and order. Let's maintain that in order to protect the rights and to protect the rights of the people of that community, right? The rights being right to pursuit of the right to pursuit of happiness, the right to pursue dreams and feed our families and be safe, and just your basic rights as a human being, right? So I think in terms of what actually works is a police system that not only respects that, but is dedicated to making sure that everybody can achieve that, or everybody has a safe space to be able to achieve that.
Have you seen that in
I
real
think that's it doesn't usually come from the communities and where I've seen it. It doesn't usually come from the police from where I've seen it. It usually comes from the communities. Like you go to some communities in Switzerland, bro, there's no police over there. There's three cars and a dog. And it's not like a sniffer drug dog. It's Doggy McDoggerson with the collar and a little beard thingy on his neck. You know what I'm saying? It's more so speaks to those communities. Now, I'm not saying that those communities are superior in any way, but I'm just it's just an observation that I've made that a community that is more likely to have stores that, and I saw this when I was in Switzerland. There was a store where there was no attendant in it. They just had a jar, and you could go in there, take what you want, and then just pay into the jar, and that was that. That's that trust system. No one is in that store. You know what I mean? So that kind of touches on what's the right setting for policing to work effectively. I mean, you're in a city where police brutality is also a very real thing. What are some of the solutions in policing that are relevant to your space?
Yeah. Well, I want to point out real quickly that it sounds like from what you said that the spaces that had the most order were actually the spaces where there were fewer enforcement officers, people responsible for enforcement, right? So would that work in every space? I don't think so, but I think that's an interesting point of discussion to highlight.
Yeah.
I think police brutality is a huge problem here in Chicago because the police, for a variety of reasons, treat Black people in a way that does not reflect a sense of humanity, a sense of equality at all across, right? Like, so, that's for the Black community. So I'll even take a step back and to say that the police don't do. Oh, this is tough. I think police are asked to do a lot, and for that reason are struggling to do anything very well, especially when you narrow it down to providing and contributing to the freedom of people. I don't think the police do that very well in this space, right? I think you have an issue where the police have been given a blank check in terms of budget and a blank check in terms of non-accountability for decades.
In the US, we're speaking of now.
Yeah, we're Chicago specifically, right? To apply whatever means they felt necessary to enforce and combat problems, to keep the peace, but really to enforce, in a lot of ways, segregation, right? And I think it's clear that it doesn't work, right? I think when you look at the amount of money that has been allotted to the police department in Chicago and how few of the shootings, not even homicides, right? Not even dead, just the shootings get solved. It points to the idea that the police may be overwhelmed or not the best department to keep shoveling money into to combat the problems that we're facing. And I think as a result, as a result of continuing to fund police officers, you get a more militaristic police department. You get this narrative that, they're facing this insurmountable, evil force, which is actually just a community of Black folks. So how often are Black folks depicted as this insurmountable evil force, right? And it perpetuates this narrative when really you have other people, other organizations that are working their ass off. But instead of, the funding that the police department gets being comparable to these other organizations, these community-focused organizations, are forced to compete amongst each other for grants and for, a fraction, for a one-time only fraction of what the police department can reliably depend on getting increased over time as politicians contribute to it. So, and what are they charged to do? A very long list of things. They're charged to keep the peace. They're charged to protect property. They're charged to investigate crimes, right? They're charged to keep schools safe, right? They're charged to, this whole list of things. And I think there are other so many things, right? Be first responders, right? Interact with people that are not necessarily criminals, but that are on drugs and that need medical help, that need mental health care, right? And all of these different things fall on the police, when really we need to figure out what the police do well and let them do that and distribute the responsibility as well as the funding to these other organizations. What have I seen the police do well? I've seen them protect property. I've seen them protect the shit out of some property. I've seen them protect. You ain't touching this. Once the police is out there, you ain't touching this property. In a lot of cases, retroactively. But once downtown decided you ain't touching a certain part of downtown no more, that shit was locked off. You can't get there. I tried to get Cordoba on today, but they decided the Cordoba block wasn't going, and I couldn't get it.
Said no today, sir.
They will protect the mess out of some property. So let them do that. And let's be clear about that. That's what they do, right? Along with whatever other responsibilities after we have a serious discussion and serious discourse about what they do well, and let them have those. But we need to reallocate responsibility and resources for a lot of those other cares, a lot of that providing of freedoms to a lot of other people, of resources to a lot of other people.
And and the whole, that is so real in the sense of being able to divide the resource pool more fairly into other organizations that can also handle some of the responsibilities. It becomes complicated in Africa, especially in the case of Nigeria now, where the police have the SARS have essentially dissolved into mercenary private security for mercenary army and private security. Army for the politicians, and then security for whoever can afford it. I remember being in Nigeria driving in a 12-car convoy that was protected by the military. You know what I mean? It wasn't the richest man in Nigeria. It was a rich man in Nigeria, but that's kind of what it is. So, the applicability of being able to divide up the resource pool, it's like there's no system around, there's no systems that are functioning in that place, right? And right now, the head that is sticking out of that rotting system is this head of these ungoverned, unchecked police, the police, right? And so I wonder what a equal split of the resources that go to those polices would look like in those areas. But I think the issues just run so deep.
Yeah, for sure. So here in the States, I mean, all of these issues, right? Even if you trace back the history of police, where that path leads you, I'll let y'all folks at home figure out what that leads you to. But where the police came from, is it makes a lot of sense when you see what we're dealing with now. I think the way that you've outlined that is hugely important, what's going on in Nigeria, because it does force us to ask some very specific questions about what I've just outlined, right? As I've managed to say it without, two phrases that are near and dear to my heart. But one of the phrases that I didn't say was defunding the police, right? Or abolishing the police. But an important aspect of this conversation is, well, if you're prepared to do that, then there are still security needs for a variety of purpose that need to be met. And so who regulates how much security any one person or corporation can amass, right? And what they do with that security. So I think it sounds like what's happening in Nigeria is a much different situation where it is private security of different types, right? Protecting different assets. And there seems to be one group that their interest that has amassed enough security to have, to make their interests, their will known and to act on it. And I think that's a very difficult infrastructural problem to solve. But like you said at the beginning of the conversation, man, having with that context, man, just support to the people that are living under that system, and support to the folks that are working every day, because I'm sure there are lots of folks that are dedicated to finding the answers to these questions and solving them in spaces like Nigeria, here in Chicago and the world over. So shout out to you all that are trying to find the answers,
front lines,
and that are living through it while you do.
Big facts.
The front lines. Yeah, man. It's a very interesting time, and I think